Okay, we're going to conclude our story from yesterday, and we'll bring, good morning, Jeremy, Ari, and Lucy.
Good morning.
We'll bring you up to speed. It's a good story, so you'll appreciate it. So very briefly, I'll just repeat the story again. So this is from this new book, volume 1 of several volumes of Rabbi Groner's diary, that which can be published, obviously. So again, some of the stories like this, he says that, it's worth repeating the whole story. The Rebbe said many times that he's not a balk peder. You know, there's certain Rebbes, they were gevura, and if you didn't listen, you were in trouble. The Rebbe was not that way. Chesed barachmim. However, there were occasions where the Rebbe made it clear that he's not going to say something unless the person commits to adhere. So there was a story once, a fellow was a businessman that submitted a question, a business question. Obviously, it was a very significant deal. And the Rebbe tells Groner, this was all by note, before I answer, find out whether he's going to listen. So I was shocked. The Rebbe should say this is very rare. So the Rebbe asked me, will he listen? Groner said, I don't know. So the Rebbe said, if you don't know, better I shouldn't say, because if I say and he doesn't listen, it'll be worse for him. So please find out whether he's going to listen. This is a very rare thing, but this is what happened. So Groner said, I called up this businessman. He said to me, listen, you know, Chassidim love to tell Chassidic stories. I want to tell you a story that I myself was witness to. It's a fascinating piece of history. And that is, in 1930, the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America on a visit, went back to Europe, and then came in 1940. So he spent almost 2 weeks in Chicago. As a result of that visit, Chassidim were made. People became connected to the Frierdiker Rebbe. Many of them had come from Chabad background, and this renewed the connection, and there were others that became. Now, 10 years later, 1940, when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to these shores, to America, so they used to come from Chicago. We know some of the cats and others used to come from for Yom Tov to New York. In 1946, now 6 years later, the Frierdiker Rebbe established a Lubavitch Yeshiva Chapim in Chicago and sent 5 Bachrim as the mentors and so on. And amongst them was Rabbi Groner himself. He was a Bacher, 1946 in Chicago. 2 weeks after we got there, Rabbi Weinberg was the Rosh Yeshiva. It seemed this Rabbi Weinberg of the Shverim in Tanya. He got a phone call from Rabbi Chadakov, the Rebbe's secretary, in the name of the Frierdiker Rebbe, that he wants the Bachrim should learn twice a week Tanakh. So there was a Jew in Chicago who was a Baki in Tanakh with all of its commentaries, and they asked him to give the shir, and he gave a beautiful shir, and he refused to take money for it. He goes into detail, the first Sefer Yeshua, he explained with all the Mefarshim, it was beautiful. Now we knew, he says, the Bachim knew that this guy was there 16 years earlier, 1930, when the Frierdiker Rebbe had come to Chicago. So he asked him to tell us stories. He told us stories, and then one story he said to us, with a condition you should remember all your life. He's going to tell a story. So we said, okay. And he said, when the Rebbe would see the Frierdiker Rebbe, there was a Jew, a 30-year-old fella, who wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael. His father was against it. His father says, look, the Rebbe is here, a holy tzaddik, a Rebbe is here. Let's go and ask the Rebbe, it's 1930, whether you should go. He said, I don't want to go. I'm not asking because I'm sure he'll say not to, and I'm going no matter what. So the father is relating this to their teacher. This is firsthand. Father says, I felt uncomfortable. The Rebbe is here, not asking. Even though my son didn't agree, I myself went in and said to the Rebbe, presented the question. Frierdiker Rebbe answered, tell your son he should not go now. So I saw that he's not against the idea, but he says not to go now. I tell this to my son who is angry, and he's angry at me. I told you not to ask, I'm going anyway. And he didn't change his position, and he set sail. There were 275 people on the ship. 3 days after it set sail, the ship sank. Looks like it did iceberg. and no one survived. The father was broken, shattered. When the shiva was over, he came back to the Chassidic Rebbe and he said, Rebbe, you could have saved 275 people from death. Why didn't you say so? So the Rebbe said to the father as follows: not all that which by we meant the Rebbeim say, we know why we're saying it. I told you what heaven told me to say. When I said your son shouldn't board or go on the ship, I didn't know that this tragedy would happen. I said so, what was told me from heaven, that when I say, he should have listened. So Rabbi says, I told this whole story to the guy on the phone, to this businessman. He's listening very carefully, and he said to me, I got the message. Please tell the Rebbe, whatever the Rebbe says, I'm going to do. The next occasion when I was by the Rebbe, says Rabbi Grona, I told the Rebbe that such and such agreed to follow the Rebbe's instruction. So the Rebbe wanted to know, how did you get the assurance? So I told the Rebbe, says Rabbi Grona, the story with the Chassidic Rebbe that I heard from our teacher in 1946 in Chicago. The Rebbe smiled broadly and he said, and now, ich hab verdient in Yiddish, I gained that I heard a story about my father-in-law that till now I didn't know. And then the Rebbe said, now what's his question? The Rebbe didn't hear the question yet. Now what's his question? So I told the Rebbe the businessman's question, and the Rebbe gave his answer in detail. I called back to this fellow, I told him the words of the Rebbe. Instead of saying thank you very much, there's silence at the end of the line. I said, did you hear the Rebbe's answer? Are you there? He says, yes, and puts down the phone. Half a year later, was already 1 o'clock in the morning, and the phone rings in the office of the secretariat, the Rabbi Gorner's office. I pick up the telephone, and on the other line, on the end, is this businessman. He says, Label, thank you very much. What are you thanking me? What did I do? And he says emotionally, you remember half a year ago, I asked the Rebbe a question that's relevant to my business, and you refused to even present my question until you heard from me that I promise I will listen? Now, he didn't know that the Rebbe had made such a condition. Label just didn't say that Rebbe made that condition. He just told him the story, which he got the message. So the fellow continues. He heard the instruction to put the phone down. So Rabbi Grotz, I remember right away, and he says, listen, look, my business was then worth $5 million. This is, I don't know when this was, 60s. When you told me the Rebbe's answer, I was convinced that I'm going to lose everything if I take these steps. And I was full of worry. But I told you, when hearing your story about the Chassidic Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, that I would listen. And that's why I didn't say anything. And though as upset as I was, I knew I had to do it. And that's why I just put the phone down. But half a year has passed. And now I can tell you that not only I didn't lose my business, but now it's worth double. It doubled. It's now worth $10 million in the 6 months. And I have no doubt, I can see without complete clarity, had I not listened, I would have lost everything. Rabbi Grona concludes, from this story, we can see how one needs to listen to what the Rebbe says, whether they understand it or not. Okay, so you heard a story within a story. All right, friends.